How can we feast on faith when the world is consuming fear? Faith is the assurance of things hoped for and yet unseen. Faith is love, weightless and yet a burden that weighs heavy on all our hearts. Faith is the dim candle lit in the darkest of days. Some days, some seasons, the light of our faith is diminished by the darkness of fear. There is something terrifying about darkness. As children, we ask our parents to keep the light on when we go to bed, when we close our eyes, sinking into the shadows of sleep. The darkness we fear is not someplace out there, but someplace in here, someplace in our minds. The shadow creatures of fear creep into our thoughts, creep through the cracks of our faith, forcing us to cling to the illusion of control. Control. We all want to be in control. Lent is a season that breaks the illusion of control. And my God, is this the lentiest of Lenten seasons? And yet, here we are, worshiping in our homes, passing the peace with our phones, loving our neighbors by leaving them all alone. Now, I'm introverted, so they say that this season is perfect for people like me. In the past, I did get to work at home, and I got a lot of work done while I was at home, but you see, I have control issues. And I really don't like being told that I must work from home. You see, the walls of my home office are squeezing me. The barking of my dogs on Zoom meetings are making all of us crazy. And the coffee and wine stains on my pajamas don't seem to be coming out. All control and sanity is gone along with my gym membership. Control keeps us from letting go and letting the Spirit of God work in a new way. I can only imagine the control issues pulsing through the veins of each disciple as they sat around the table with Jesus at that Last Supper. Judas comes to mind. He is the bookkeeper of this band of Jesus fanatics. He always wants the numbers to balance at the end of the day and will not let any frivolous spending go unchecked. But then Jesus drops a bombshell on his little stock holdings, and Judas gets all anxious, and the downward direction in which Jesus is moving is making him very uneasy. Jesus keeps talking about death. His death. But you see, there is no gain in dying. I mean, how can they follow a leader who is buried beneath the ground? Every disciple at that table was scared. But Judas was a man of action, and he was going to solve this little problem by pushing Jesus in the right direction. So Judas plots the perfect plan to get Jesus to make a move. Judas was simply going to force the hand of Jesus by wanting Jesus to make his final stand against, the controlling government and the religious powers of their day. Yes, Judas may have been having an ethical lapse in judgment, but it was for the benefit of everyone. Judas sits down at the Last Supper, sits at the table among his brothers and sisters, all listening to Jesus. But his mind is heavy with worry and fear as he works the plan over and over in his head. He tries to stay present. He tries to stay in control, but his blood pressure is running high and his heart is beating in his chest. His face is pale and his hands turn clammy. Then Judas is suddenly jolted out of his mindset by Jesus' words. Tonight, one of you will betray me. The room goes quiet right before everyone pledges their allegiance. The walls then seem to close in as his chest tightens. Christ, he was losing control. So Judas leaves the room in search of fresh air. He steps outside and the cold reality stings the sweat of his brow. And so Judas never returns to the table. I have wondered, what if Judas had gone back inside? What if Judas had returned to the table? What if he had heard the next words of Jesus? Words that came in the form of a prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Words of hope. Give us this day our daily bread. Words of love. Forgive our debts as we forgive our debtors. And words of faith. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from all evil. Maybe if Judas had gone back inside, he would have seen the candles flicker at Jesus' words. The light dancing in the darkness as the bread, the body of Christ, was passed through the shadows. As the cup, the blood of Christ, was held lightly by each disciple. We know that in the garden, Jesus was scared. We know he prayed for another way. And yet at the table, Christ was willing to share the burden of fear, the burden of despair with his beloved. It is at the table where Christ invites us to feast on faith together. Jesus says, "Come to the table, everyone, where all is shared." Where our fear is laid bare, where our desire for control crumbles to the floor, where our beloved sisters and brothers help us hold all the worries, all the burdens, all the chaos of the world. This is where we feast on faith. We come to the table with Christ, who gives us courage to go to the cross, to rest in the grave, and then one day rise again. This week, and even in the weeks and months ahead, let us cling to the light of Christ. As you return to your lives, remember to carry the Christ candle together. Let us hold the flames of our faith that push back the darkness of fear. Amen.